So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what's going to happen. It may come to fisticuffs in your own parish. That's what it can come to. The whole society may split. If the society has to split, it'll be a triumph of Rome, absolute triumph of Rome. Except that God will get out of it, in a manner of speaking. God is God. He will get out of it a purifying of the resistance to all of this. So whether the resistance reforms outside the society, it's had to reform outside the society, because Bishop Philip retains control of the society, or if the resistance pushes Bishop Philip, manages to push Bishop Philip and his friends out, whichever way, on the one hand Rome wins because it splits society, on the other hand God wins, because the resistance will have a much clearer idea of what it's about. There won't be, the liberals and the anti-liberals will separate, and the anti-liberals will have a much clearer idea of what they're about, and they won't be. But then, as I said, you heard me say, another 10 years later, it'll start all over again. I mean, that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
So, sorry to interrupt again. Who was it who said that the society would be fine for 40 years?
It's an interesting question. It's Père Barriel. This is what I remember.
Yes.
Père Barriel was an old, when I was at École, he was an old French priest. He was born in 1897. When I knew him, he was in his 70s and 80s, and he died in 1983, I think, yes, 1983. So he died at the age of 86, and when I knew him, he must have been in his mid-70s, mid to late 70s and early 80s, okay. He was a priest in France during the Second World War, and he attached himself. He had been parish priest of a big French parish in Marseille, down in the south of France. And he had some parishioners who went off to do the spiritual exercises of 5 days with a certain Spanish priest called Father Valle. Excuse me. Which is actually a French name, V-A-L-L-E-T, but he was Spanish from Catalonia. Father Valle had been a Jesuit. He died in 1947. He had been a Jesuit. And he understood the exercises. He was absolutely enthusiastic about the exercises. He was a brilliant preacher of the exercises. And certain parishioners went from Father Valle's parish to do the exercises, and they came back valiant parishioners, much more valiant than ever. So Père Barriel scratched his head and he said, there's something here. And so off he went himself to do the exercises. And he was set on fire. And so he got permission to leave the diocese and to join Père Valle's little congregation. So he joined, I think, Père Valle in 1942, during the war, in the south of France, in Vichy France, in the non-occupied France. And he spent then 2 years by the side of Père Valle and listened to a lot of things that Père Valle had said and picked up a lot from him, learned how to do the exercises, and later it's he who would teach the seminarians of École how to give the exercises, and the seminarians of École, the future priests, the priests of École, the seminarians turned priests would take the exercises all over the world, and those are the 5-day exercises which probably a number of you have done.
It was Father Valle himself who actually formed the 5-day.
Who formed the 5-day version of Ignatius's 30-day exercises. The original, they're 30 days long, but Père Valle adapted it in 5 days. He condensed the 30 days into 5 days so that people today who can't take a whole month off but can take a week off, a lot of modern men with modern jobs were able to do the exercises. And they were a great success in Paris, in France, in the south of France, during the late 30s and during the 40s. In 1944, Valle had to flee France because of the quote-unquote liberation. The communists were liberating France, and they were killing anybody right-wing, and they killed a lot of Catholics, especially fervent and Catholics who got the number of communism. So the communists were killing the people like Lefebvre. So Lefebvre fled to Spain, which was under Franco at the time, and there he set up the exercises again with limited success for various reasons, and he died in 1947. So he was only 3 years back in Spain, his own country. He wasn't in Catalonia, it was his own part of Spain. So Pere Valle picked up a lot of things. Pere Barrier picked up a lot of things from Pere Valle, and then when he was at École, Pere Barrier frequently quoted Father Valle, these things that he remembered Father Valle saying. Father Valle had studied the exercises inside out. He studied the history of the exercises. He studied the use of the exercises in various congregations down the years, from the time of St. Ignatius onwards. He knew the exercises inside out, so to speak. And when Pere Valle studied the history of the exercises, he observed something. That any congregation that preached the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, it took more or less 40 years before that congregation was somehow gotten at and didn't preach the exercises anymore. In other words, every time a founder started up a society or a congregation or an order with the exercises a major part, a component of its apostolate, the devil hates those exercises, and within 40 years usually, he would succeed in paralyzing, crippling, diluting, undoing that congregation or that order or that whatever. And so the Society of St. Pius X was founded in 1970. The seminarians began preaching the exercises, began helping Pere Barriel, the seminarians began helping Pere Barriel to preach the exercises in 1974. So 1973. I know because I was the first seminarian that was helping Pere Barriel. So I knew about him. And then there are others, plenty others followed and so on and so on. So, but he was the first seminarian, he said, here's a train ticket, we're going. Okay, what did you say, Father? Okay, I think so, oh, great. And so he said, after 40 years, the devil nobbles any order, congregation, house, society, giving exercises. The society began preaching the exercises, seminarians of École began preaching exercises in 1973. We're 1 year away from 21-3, which is 40 years. So there you are. So, because the society has done a lot of preaching, it's just an interesting coincidence. A very interesting coincidence. But what is logical is that the devil hates the exercises, because the spiritual exercises really put Catholics back on their feet, men and women. Best for men because the men are more logical, and these exercises are very logical. But they do a lot of good to women as well, especially when the women then go home and send their husbands. Honey, you better do those exercises. Honey, you better do those exercises. Honey, I'm telling you, you do those exercises. Yes, darling, yes, darling, yes, darling. So, they've been given, and to tell you the truth, many women today are more manly in a good sense than many men are. It's terrible. Many men today are dish rags. It's incredible. The men are undone because their minds are not functioning. The prerogative woman is the emotions, and she's much better in emotions. But the mind of women doesn't always function, or it doesn't always kick in. But so, if the exercises appeal to the mind, appeal to the reason, appeal to logic, that is not where you get women. You get women by making them weep. That's an exaggeration, of course, but there are exceptions. Mrs. Thatcher was the best man that woman had. The best man that England had at the time. But how many of you have seen the Meryl Streep film on Lady Thatcher? It's worth seeing. what would you say about it, Alan? It's
the drawing. It was it's more like a woman with dementia who also happened to be Prime Minister.
Yes.
They concentrated too much on that.
That's it. The filmmakers are all left-wingers. And she was, but the left-wingers feel challenged by this right-wing figure who really stood for the right-wing and successfully. And so the left-wingers have to deal with that. And so they come back to it like the moth to the flame. They come back to these right-wingers who really got some convictions. Because the left-wingers can't understand people have convictions opposed to their religion. Because socialism is their religion. The New World Order is the religion of left-wingers. So but when they come back, they have to pull it down. So they're driven to come back to her, but they're also driven to pull it down. So they present her essentially in old age as a demented old woman, but with flashbacks which give you some of her career. She was a remarkable enough woman to make even a flashbacks presentation worth it, I would say. And the acting of Meryl Streep is exceptional. She's a very exceptional actress. She's a left-winger. But she too feels called out, if you like. She felt this was a person that she wanted to get inside the skin of, and she certainly got inside the skin of Lady Thatcher. And the mannerisms, it really is very like her. The voice, the inflection, everything. It's a brilliant piece of acting. It's not a handsome piece of work altogether, but it does allow you to get a good glimpse of Mrs. Thatcher, who was not Catholic, but she had something. She didn't like the New World. She didn't like Europe. She had a lot. She had a lot of good old British values, which most people were abandoning by then, or had abandoned, and they've abandoned even more. But she stood for many things that Britain used to stand for, and she stood successfully because she was so convinced. There are some good quotes of hers in the film. She calls the Liberals implacable placators and lily-livered liberals. She's got some good phrases. It's interesting to see. That's the phrase about the 40 years. And the society is now it really looks as though society is going to have to split. It's very sad and very serious. But humanly it's a disaster, but divinely it may be a great purification, a great and good purification. So, what you want to get, what you men need is to get the ideas clear, to get your mind functioning, and to get your ideas and the principles clear, so that you can judge in the light of high principles what's going on, so that you don't follow just by your emotions, you don't get led around by the nose by your emotions. Oh, Rome, oh, Rome. Oh, the Archbishop, oh, the Archbishop. Several fools sing that little song. The Archbishop would have been the last person that people have people singing his name and his praises and so on. The Archbishop, if you stand for what I stand, that's fine, but don't stand for me. I'm not what it's about. So, let me read to you, if I can find it, one more answer from here. I've read you these two answers, which are very good. I think there's another one I'd like to read. This is the 1989 interview. Here's another classic objection. Danger of schism. Question: are you not afraid that in the end, when the good Lord will have called you to him, little by little the split will grow wider, and we will find ourselves being confronted with a parallel church alongside what some call the quote-unquote visible church? Archbishop Lefebvre: this talk about the quote-unquote visible church on the part of Don Girard and Mr. Maniron is childish. Don Girard was the abbot of the Benedictine Abbey that split away from the society immediately after the consecrations. Madiran, Jean Madiran, was the editor of a prestigious Catholic journal called Itinéraire. Prestigious during the 60s and 70s, and which rendered great service to the Catholic cause in the 60s and 70s. But then when John Paul II became Pope, Madiran went all gooey. Oh, he's the Pope. A very intelligent man, and he went all gooey. And so he also quit the Archbishop. And d'Angerand and Madiran both then criticised the Archbishop for setting up a church opposite the visible church. Understand, the visible church is the Catholic Church. Therefore, if you're outside the visible church, you're outside the Catholic Church. The Archbishop said such talk is childish. It is incredible that anyone could talk of the quote-unquote visible church, meaning the conciliar church as opposed to the Catholic Church, which we are trying to represent and continue. I am not saying that we are the Catholic Church. I have never said so. No one can reproach me with ever having wished to set myself up as Pope. But we do truly represent the Catholic Church such as it was before, because we are continuing what it always did. It is we who have the notes of the visible church, one, holy, Catholic, apostolic. That is what makes the visible church. Where are those 4 marks? He argues about the 4 marks. I'm not sure if it's here or elsewhere. Well, I'll go on anyway, yeah. Mr. Madiran objects. The official church also has infallibility, quote unquote. However, on the subject of infallibility, we must say, as Father Dulac said in a suggested phrase concerning Pope Paul VI, when years ago the church had several popes, one could choose amongst them. Now we have 2 popes in one. We have a pope of the modernized church, and he's the same as the Pope of the Catholic Church. The one Pope, 2 churches. 2 churches. Instead of ways back, 2 popes for 1 church, now it's 1 Pope for 2 churches. Each of these recent popes is truly 2 popes in one. Insofar as they represent tradition, the tradition of the popes, the tradition of infallibility, we agree with the modern popes. But we are attached to him insofar as he continues the succession of Peter, and because of the promises of infallibility which have been made to him, it is we who are attached to the Pope's infallibility. But he, the modern popes, even if he in certain respects carries the infallibility within his being Pope, nevertheless by his intentions and ideas, the conciliar Pope is opposed to infallibility because he wants nothing more to do with infallibility. He does not believe in it, and he makes no act stamped with the stamp of infallibility. That is why they wanted Vatican II to be a partial council and not a dogmatic council, because they do not believe in infallibility. They do not want a once and for all truth. They do not want a fixed, stable, unchanging truth. The truth must live and it must evolve. That's the modern idea. It may eventually change with time, with history, with knowledge. Whereas infallibility fixes a formula once and for all, it makes and stamps a truth as being unchangeable. That is why the liberals can't believe in, and that is something the liberals can't believe in. And that is why we are the supporters of infallibility, and the conciliar church is not. The conciliar church is against infallibility, that's for sure and certain. Cardinal Ratzinger is against infallibility. The Pope is against infallibility by his philosophical formation. Understand me rightly. We are not against the Pope insofar as he represents all the values of the Apostolic See, which are unchanging, of the See of Peter. But we are against the Pope insofar as he is a modernist, who does not believe in his own infallibility, who practices ecumenism. Obviously, we are against the conciliar church, which is virtually schismatic, even if they deny it. In practice, it is a church virtually excommunicated because it is a modernist church. And then we are the ones that are apparently excommunicated. Why? Because we wish to remain Catholic, we wish to stay with the Catholic Pope and with the Catholic Church. That is the difference. For Mr. Madiran, who otherwise had a good grasp of the situation, to say that we are not the quote-unquote visible church, that we are quoting the visible church, which is infallible, all that is just words which do not correspond to reality. Unfortunately, that's not where the Archbishop goes through the 4 marks and shows that that tradition is part of the Catholic Church. It's not part of the Conciliar Church, but it is part of the Catholic Church. It's not here. But what there is here is another very precious answer. Benevolence towards tradition. Question. What should we think of the attitude of Rome as characterized by Cardinals Ratzinger and Meyer, who, up till now, are showing a certain tolerance towards conservative groups, traditional groups like Lefebvre, the Fraternity of St. Vincent Ferrier, the Society of St. Peter? Do you think that these cardinals are sincere? Is it a double game that they will keep up until they have exhausted all other means of rallying other traditional groups to Rome, and then, once the game is over, those that have been reconciled with Rome will be asked to submit to the council? Or should we credit these cardinals with taking a turn for the better? If these cardinals are being nicey-nicey to certain trad groups, are these cardinals being genuinely nice, or is it a game? Answer the Archbishop. There are plenty of signs showing us that what you're talking about is simply exceptional and temporary. They are not general rules applying to all priests throughout the world. They are exceptional privileges being granted in precise cases. Thus, what is granted to the Abbey of Fontcombe, or to the Sister of Jules, or to other monasteries, but they do not say it is according to the Indult. The Indult of 1984. Now, the Indult is an exception. It can always be taken back. An Indult confirms a general rule. By its nature, it's an exception. The general rule in this case is the new Mass and the new liturgy. Hence, what these cardinals are doing is making an exception for these communities, an exception which confirms the rule. We have an example in London where the Cardinal Archbishop has inaugurated 3 masses around the Society Church in the capital of Great Britain in order to try to take away our people. Quote, "I am trying it for 6 months," unquote, he said. "If our faithful begin to leave the SSPX centre, he will keep up the experiment. If, on the contrary, the faithful stay with us, he will suppress the experiment. If these masses are then suppressed, the faithful who have regained a taste for the traditional liturgy are capable, will no doubt come over to us." It seems that Cardinal Lustiger in Paris is envisaging giving the church to the priests who left us, but he would require that the new masses also be celebrated in his churches. In our discussions in Rome with Cardinal Ratzinger in May of '87, he told me, when we were moving towards an agreement, that if authorization was given to use the old liturgy of Saint Nicolas du Chardonnay, there would also have to be new masses. That was perfectly clear, and it clearly shows their state of mind. For them, there is no question of abandoning the new Mass. On the contrary, that's obvious. That is why what can look like a concession, same thing exactly today, what can look like a concession is in reality merely a maneuver to separate from us the largest number of faithful possible, or a maneuver to split the SSPX down the middle. This is the perspective in which they seem to be always giving a little more and even going very far. Negotiates for the last few weeks and months. Then, we must absolutely convince our faithful that it is no more than a maneuver, that it is dangerous to put oneself into the hands of conciliar bishops and modernist Rome. It is the greatest danger threatening our people. You've got it right there. If we have struggled for 20 years, now 40 years, to avoid the conciliar errors, it was not in order now to put ourselves in the hands of those who profess these errors. I mean, how much more clearly can it be said? That's it. What? They see the doctrine. What characterizes these conciliar people is that they profess errors. They profess things contrary to the doctrine of the church. How can, if you're taking your stand on the doctrine of the church, how can you schmooze people that aren't changing the doctrine of the church? It's not possible. But that's what they're doing. That's what they want to do. Doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense. So, those are the answers, the precious answers of those years. When all is said and done, question, you then have no regrets? Archbishop's answer, no, none at all. I think that everything that happened about the consecrations was brought about in a truly providential and almost miraculous way. And today as well, we may watch God acting in a providential and truly almost miraculous way to protect and save and purify tradition. I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's the end result. Humanly, it looks like a horrible mess. Divinely, it may be the Lord God sorting out tradition. The Archbishop goes on. Many people were urging me, quote, "You're growing old. If you happen to disappear, what will become of us?" Unquote. I could have ordained bishops 3 or 4 years ago at least. It would even have been reasonable. But I think that the good Lord wanted things to ripen gently, to show Rome clearly that we have done everything we could to manage to obtain the authorization to have truly traditional bishops. He did all he could to get the official authorization to carry on the tradition. The official church refused the authorization. That's why the Archbishop went on his own. Even while signing the protocol, Rome refused to give us those bishops, and if we had gone on, in practice we would have had every imaginable kind of difficulty. I truly think we had to come to the decision which I took, and we were at the very end of our rope. 2.5 years later, he's dead. Our dear friend Bishop de Galarretas is so tired now that he can no longer say his Mass, and that is less than 1 year after the consecrations. I truly think it was all miraculous. His coming, his journey, his admirable profession of faith as Bishop Galarreta, his acceptance to perform with me the ceremony of the consecration by bishops, all that was miraculous. The press did not realize the importance of his being there. But for me and the bishops who were consecrated, that was truly quite an exceptional grace. The fact that there were 2 bishops to consecrate them is very important. As for me, I feel well. I have no grave illness, but nevertheless I feel the tiredness, and I'm going to be obliged to give up completely performing the ceremonies which I still accept to perform because I no longer have the strength. I would now be quite incapable of making these worldwide journeys as I used to do. They insist on my return to the Argentine that I go to the United States to see the new seminary, but there are limits, and I have reached my limits. I'm only going to keep up the things which are now not tiring, like the blessing of a chapel, the taking of the veil with the Carmelites, attending the first Mass. In sum, little with what I used to do before. I can clearly feel that for me too, the 30th of June last year was my limit. I think that the good Lord wished things to happen as they happened. All those who attended the ceremony retained an extraordinary memory of it. All of that was providential. What one may hope is that the faithful should become more and more numerous, that they open their eyes and finish by seeing where the truth is, and recognize that salvation is in tradition and not in the conciliar church, which is more and more schismatic. Question. Of course you realize that your name has disappeared from the latest edition of the Annuarii Pontificia, the papal yearbook edited in Rome. Archbishop's answer. I think that my name has not disappeared from the yearbook of the good Lord. At least I hope so. And that is what matters. So, you know. Oh boy. Well, that's I'm missing the text. I may find it elsewhere. On the 4 marks from Bishop Galarreta, may have got it. Any questions on that, on anything there? Christian?
Throughout the Archbishop's life, I mean, did he become sort of more cynical towards the end of his life, or was it just an acceptance of the reality of the situation?
I wouldn't say cynical. I don't think that's the right word. He just recognised the Romans for what they were. He hoped against hope that they would be better than what he thought. But he was realistic. He didn't go in for wishful thinking. He wanted the Romans to authorize, but he suspected they wouldn't. He wasn't confident they would. Sure enough, they didn't. Then he acts on his mind. He's not acting on his feelings. So I don't think it was a question of cynicism. It's just that he had a lot of experience. He knew the world. He knew these churchmen. He knew that they were not all that they should be. He knew they were going way off track. But I don't think that's the cynicism. That's just realism, I would call it. So he was realistic and driven to be more realistic than ever. Let's move on. Tomorrow with the idea of giving you the principles and what this is all basically about. It's the modern world against our Lord Jesus Christ. What are the ideas about state and church, God, man, life of the Catholic Church, and what are the ideas of the state and work and church, world, man, God, the ideas of the New World Order? They clash head-on, and the syllabus lays out the idea of the Catholic ideas, which is what tradition is basically defending. The Archbishop said, you'll notice once or twice, the syllabus is where it's at. It was the syllabus nailed the modern eras, the modern world, and that's what the clash is all about. Well, let me now then give you Bishop de Galarreta prepared for the Superiors meeting in Albano of October last year, October 7th, a feast by the end of the Rosary. Bishop de Galarreta wrote a text which is 12 pages long. It's not all that long, but it's very clear, and it's right down the line. And so he starts by saying, it's called Reflections Concerning the Roman Proposal. We're talking about the Roman proposal. Why is that keeping these things secret? Normally, somebody keeping things secret has got something to hide. And what he was hiding was his sellout. And that's what I would say. That's what it looks like. He would have a different version of what he was doing. He would say that it was the Romans that insisted upon confidentiality. It's not he that wanted confidentiality, it was the Romans that insisted on everything. Well, again, my answer to that would be that when it came to the discussions, it's the society that was in the driving seat and not Rome. Normally, of course, Rome is always in the driving seat because it's the supreme authority. But if you have the truth, and Rome doesn't have the truth is in the driving seat. And therefore the society was in the driving seat. And therefore, if Rome said, we want these discussions to be confidential, Bishop Wiliamsons should have said, no way, Jose. And if you don't like the condition that they're going to be completely transparent and open, then there are going to be no discussions. We don't want these discussions, it's you don't want these discussions. And then the Romans would have had to backtrack and think twice and come back again with some other idea. Or they would have had to accept open. And then whenever Bishop Wiliamsons did something with the Romans, he would have immediately published it to the whole world. He would say, this is what they're proposing, and this is what we answer. This is the latest text. That's what Archbishop Lefebvre did. Archbishop Lefebvre had nothing to hide, because he wasn't planning to double back on what he was doing. He was going to stay on what he was doing and stay. But Bishop Wiliamsons had the idea way back in 2000, when very soon after the Cardinal's Peanuts, as they're called, that famous lunch of August, with the three bishops and the Cardinal, way back at the time of the Cardinal's Peanuts, soon after that, the Cardinal is meant to have said, if it depended on Bishop Wiliamsons alone, he would be signing. Way back in 2001. In 2001, I can remember, the fax machines were running white hot because people were so concerned that Bishop Wiliamsons was going to sign away the society. 2001, that's 12 years ago. So he's been working in that direction, but he's had to hide it because still there's always been too much opposition from inside the society. Too much opposition. Therefore he's had to pretend that he wasn't selling out the society or handing the society over to Rome. He's like, but that's what he's really been about. He's been putting district superiors in place who will agree with him. He's been, etc. He's been making these moves all this time in that direction. I know, for instance, that Father Lefebvre, who's the French district superior, says that it's only last year that he understood what Bishop Wiliamsons was up to. Prior to that, Father Lefebvre was a loyal servant, a loyal and obedient servant of Bishop Wiliamsons for many years. From when he became district superior, he was very loyal and obedient. He would not entertain the idea that Mexico could be way off track or moving towards handing the society over to Rome. Wouldn't believe that. But August of last year, something happened which opened his eyes, and he saw that what Bishop Wiliamsons was really up to. And since then, he's now absolutely against the these negotiations with Rome. He's absolutely against selling out the Society of Rome. But he's an example of somebody who for a long time went along with it and has only recently opened his eyes. I think more and more people are now opening their eyes. How do I get to talk to Father Cacker? I forget. Doesn't matter. The Roman text. If I limit myself to the preliminary note and the doctrinal preamble of September of 1 month ago, I must say straight away they are confused, equivocal, false, and essentially bad. That's not somebody who's talking backwards and come cleverly and diplomatically. Boom. These Romans documents are confused, double-tongued, false, and essentially bad. That's it, guys. Now it remains to prove. Even the apparent openness to criticizing the council is sibylline. It's enigmatic and cunning. It's a well-laid trap. Legitimate discussion, expressions or formulations, according to criteria of interpretation of the necessary Catholic doctrine. That is to say, according to the preamble, especially towards the end. This document is substantially unacceptable. It is worse than the Protocol of 1988, especially with regard to the Council and the post-conciliar magisterium.